Abdomen. The pregnant woman has an enlarged abdomen. Bereave. The lost hikers were bereft of hope when the rescue plane did not see them. The children are bereaved by the death of their parents. Consecrate. This battlefield is consecrated to the memory of the soldiers who died here. Evoke. A good joke does not necessarily evoke a hearty laugh. Groove. Wheels left grooves in a muddy dirt road. Jolt. The old car jolted its passengers badly as it went over the rough road. Obsolete. Bowing to greet a lady is now an obsolete custom. Prowl. Many wild animals prowl at night looking for something to eat. Scoop. The children scooped holes in the sand. Status. Diplomats are interested in the status of world affairs. Sue. The farmer sued the railroad station because his cow was killed by the train. Part 2. Bandit. The bandit in a typical Western movie rides a horse and goes armed, either alone or in a group. Commemorate. Christmas commemorates the birth of Jesus Christ. Defile. The children's muddy shoes defiled all the rugs in the hotel. Deviation. Running in the hall is a deviation from the school rules and will not be allowed. Fortitude. She could bear the disappointments of other people with tolerable fortitude. Inconsolable. The little girl was inconsolable at the loss of her kitten. Nibble. Aren't you hungry? You are only nibbling your food. Pageant. The coronation of the new king was a splendid pageant. Scourge. After the scourge of flood usually comes the scourge of disease. Tumble. The crippled child tumbled down the stairs and was badly hurt. Part 3. Afflict. There are many illnesses which afflict old people. Censure. His employer censured him for neglecting his work. Dissimulation. The thief intruded into the house with caution and dissimulation. Flog. Nowadays, it is an inhuman punishment to flog the disobedient soldiers or sailors. Inscription. According to the inscription on its cornerstone, this building was erected in 1919. Medal. The gifts of charity meddled with a gentleman's private affair. Posture. He doesn't sit straight. His posture is very bad. Rummage. John rummaged all the drawers to find his gloves. Spout. The water spouted out when the pipe was broken. Traverse. The climber traversed a long horizontal crack in the face of the mountain slope. Wistful. A child stood looking with wistful eyes at the toys in the shop window. Part 4. Amicable. The amicable flash of her white teeth was very impressive. Blizzard. The soldiers are very exhausted, for they have advanced forward without rest in a blizzard. Cruise. If I were rich, I would like to cruise in the Southern Pacific for 6 months in a private yacht. Eradicate. Yellow fever has been eradicated in the United States, but it still exists in some countries. Glimmer. The doctor's report gave us only a glimmer of hope. Lump. On his desk, many articles and documents are always piled in a great lump. Ransack. The woman ransacked the house for her lost jewelry. Slash. He slashed a path through the high grass with a long knife. Slump. Our feet slumped repeatedly through the melting ice. Vogue. That pop song had a great vogue at one time. Part 5. Ascribe to. He ascribes his success to skill and hard work. Bulwark. The soldiers kept their heads down behind the bulwark. Dubious. She looked around this way and that in a dubious manner. Facet. Selfishness was a facet of his character that we seldom saw before. Heed. For the first time, he had to pay heed to his appearance, and in fact, he became very well dressed from then on. Huddle. The boys huddled together under the rock to keep warm. Mumble. The old man mumbled something to me, but I could not understand him. Relic. This ruined bridge is a relic of the Gulf War. Smog. Automobile exhaust fumes are one of the major causes of smog. Wayfarer. The thirsty wayfarer was glad to find a fresh spring near the road. Want. He always speaks with his mouth full of food. It is his want. Absolve. The judge absolved the man of the crime. Bias. The umpire should have no bias in favor of either side. Contend. Our baseball team is contending for the championship. Deplore. We deplore the terrible traffic accident in which 30 persons were killed and 50 injured. Fracture. The boy fell from a tree and suffered fractures of his right arm and leg. Magnitude. A crowd of great magnitude attended the president's inauguration. Pith. The pith of his speech was focused on the importance of education. Relish. I have no relish for seeing people being whipped. Sneak. Trying not to be seen, they quietly sneaked into the room. Tidings. The messenger brought tidings from the battlefield. Part 2. Aghast. Many people would be aghast at the thought of another war. Cumber. We shall not cumber our thoughts with his reproaches. Decree. The city government decreed that all dogs must be licensed. Frolic. The children were frolicking with the puppy in the backyard. Intercourse. There was much commercial intercourse between the two countries before World War II. Menace. In dry weather, forest fires are a great menace. Precipice. I was standing on the very edge of a bank, a precipice not less than 50 feet deep. Sanctuary. The church is generally considered as a sanctuary. Sprout. After a light spring rain, leaves began to sprout from trees. Tread. She trod lightly in order not to wake the sleeping baby. Part 3. Ammunition. The soldiers still had their guns, but they were out of ammunition. Doting. The doting mother alienates her husband by lavishing too much love on their child. Engross. The artist was so engrossed in his painting that he didn't notice the people watching him. Gush. If you got a deep cut in your arm, there's usually a gush of blood. Insuperable. The deep river was an insuperable barrier to those who could not swim. Ordeal. Her life has been full of ordeals, sickness, poverty, and loss of her beloved son. Pouch. He kept his tobacco in a leather pouch fastened to the belt. Screech. The brakes screeched and the car suddenly stopped with a jerk. Stature. A man who is 6 feet tall is above the average stature in China. Undermine. The president's enemies are spreading ill rumors to undermine his authority. The house is unsafe since the foundations were undermined by floods. Part 4. Assess. Damages from last week's flood have been assessed at $50,000. Chamber. The children searched each and every chamber of the house for the cat. The Congress of the United States has 2 chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Disdain. Now that she is rich, she disdains to speak to her old friends. Espy. One day, Robinson Crusoe espied a footprint on the sand. Glossy. The beautiful glossy coat of the cat shone as it lay in the sunlight. Janitor. The janitor swept the floors and locked up the building every night. Packet. She bought a packet of envelopes at the stationery store. Pulpit. The eloquent and ornate carving on a church pulpit was done by Indian hands. Scorch. The meat was black and scorched outside, but still raw inside. The grass is scorched by so much hot sunshine in summer. Surge. The ship surged in the stormy seas, rolling and pitching with each wave. Utensil. Pots, pans, and kettles are useful kitchen utensils. Part 5. Bayonet. When the soldiers ran out of ammunition, they fixed bayonets to their rifles. Compassion. Compassion for the orphans caused him to give money for their support. Detain. Lazy boys sometimes are detained at school to do extra work after ordinary lessons are finished. The police detained the suspected thief for more questioning. Faction. A faction in our club tried to make the president resign. Hue. The diamond shone with every hue under the bright sun. Luster. He polished the metal until it had a fine luster. The deeds of heroes add luster to a nation's history. Persevere. He persevered in his study until he succeeded. Rave. Because of his high fever, the sick man raved all night. Slay. He intended to slay his father's murderer. Tablet. The doctor told her to take 3 tablets a day. Voluptuous. Nowadays, an actress with voluptuous beauty seems to be very popular. Access. The only access to the farmhouse is across the rice fields. Only high officials had access to the emperor. Beckon. The guide for visitors beckoned us to follow him. Concur. I concur with the speaker in condemning every criminal. This summer, 2 weeks of rain concurred with our vacation. Denounce. He was denounced as a coward and traitor. Fray. The first blow makes the anger, but the second makes the fray. Long wear had frayed the collar and cuffs of his old shirts. Hamper. Heavy clothing hampered the movements of the climbers. Malady. Cancer and tuberculosis are serious maladies in every country. Plod. The old man was plodding wearily along the bank of the river. Remnant. Since the factory moved, this town has only a remnant of its former population. Snore. The child with a cold in his nose snored all night. Tinge. Blood tinged the water as he washed his wound. Part 2. Ailment. It was necessary for them to have remedies for their ailments. Bicker. The children are bickering with each other about who is the tallest among them. Contrive. The inventor contrived a new kind of engine with fewer moving parts. Dazzle. The bright light of the motor car on the dark country road dazzled my eyes. Fumble. She fumbled about in her handbag for a pen to write a memorandum. Impair. Poor food and hard work impaired her health, and she became thin. Mortify. The parents were mortified by their children's bad behavior before the guests. Predominant. The United States became the predominant nation in the Western Hemisphere. Sanitary. He worked to improve the sanitary conditions of slums. Wallet. He always keeps a lot of money in his wallet. Warrant. Do you consider the wild behavior of the crowd was enough of a warrant for the police to use force? Part 3. Allocate. The Ford Foundation allocated millions of dollars for cancer research. Brawl. The brawl in the street could be heard in the house nearby. Cynical. The boys made several cynical remarks to cover up their disappointment at being left out of the play. Embellish. She embellished the simple dress with colorful laces and ribbons. Gallant. The defense of the Alamo was a heroic action of gallant men. Immerse. He immersed his aching feet in a bucket of cold water. Ostentatious. He rode his new bicycle up and down in front of our house in an ostentatious way. Presentiment. Soapy followed the man with a presentiment that luck would again run against him. Satiate. She was so satiated with bananas that she would not even look at one. Undulate. The field of wheat was undulating in the breeze. Part 4. Apparel. A shop selling women's apparel is at the corner of the street. Cajole. He cajoled his friends into deciding in his favor. Discard. You can discard your old coat, but not your old friends. Effete. During the Middle Ages, Greek civilization declined and became effete. Grudge. She has had a grudge against me ever since I disagreed with her. Kidnap. 4 men kidnapped the little girl, but the police soon caught them and rescued the girl. Pact. There is some hope that a peace pact will be signed between the two countries. She pries too closely into the private life of her friends. Scour. Men scoured the whole country looking for the lost child. The servant scoured the frying pan until it shone like silver. Swagger. He swaggered down the street after winning the fight. Vagary. The building of this house in the shape of the temple was a rich man's vagary. Part 5. Asset. Ability to get along with people is an asset in business. Chasm. There was a deep political chasm between the two countries, which nearly led to a war. Despoil. The cities of Greece and Asia were despoiled of their most valuable ornaments. Facetious. I became angry with the little boy at his facetious remarks. Hurdle. The wing of an airplane came off and the machine hurtled to the ground. Larceny. He wanted to be accused of larceny because he felt comfortable in prison. Pervade. He worked so hard that the weariness pervaded his whole body. Recant. Though he was tortured to make him change his religion, the prisoner would not recant. Shambles. He left his affairs in a complete shambles when he died. Taboo. Eating human flesh is a taboo in civilized countries. Trappings. He wore all the trappings of high office. Abdicate. When the king abdicated his throne, his brother succeeded him. Accrue. Ability to think clearly will accrue to you from good habits of study. Badger. The salesman has been badgering my father for 2 weeks to buy a new car. Baffle. They succeeded in baffling the enemy's attack plans. Conjecture. He conjectured that his new stocks would rise on the stock market. Derange. The poor woman's mind has been deranged for many years. Fiend. The natives thought the explorer was possessed by a fiend. Pine. The mother was pining to see her son and daughter. Smother. The gas almost smothered the coal miners, but they got out in time. Throb. The long climb up the mountain made her heart throb rapidly. Part 2. Broth. Many people usually drink hot broth when they are sick. Crevice. Some tiny plants grow in the crevice of the stone wall. Demean. The Duke's son demeaned himself by doing manual labor with his servants. Foster. We fostered the young girl while her mother was in hospital. Incentive. Our country has prospered by various incentive systems. Maze. A guide led us through the maze of tunnels in the cave. Pour. She pored over the picture book in silence, enjoying the various colors. Like human skin, soil has holes that are called pores. Rubbish. Pick up the rubbish and throw it in the garbage can. Speculate. We don't need to speculate about the possible winner in the game. Transfix. Sweet music caught and held him transfixed against the iron fence. Part 3. Anomaly. A bird that cannot fly is an anomaly. Converge. If you look at the end of your nose, your eyes converge. Duplicate. We have a duplicate key to the front door. Epic. The introduction of the computer will mark an epoch in language education. Gaunt. Hunger and suffering from cold has made the lost hikers gaunt. Incessant. The incessant barking of the dog kept him awake through the night. Mute. Though the teacher asked a simple question about her parents, the little girl stood mute with embarrassment. Partisan. He was a passionate partisan of these people and had organized a workers' union. Scan. The parents of the sick boy scanned the doctor's face for a sign of hope. She scanned the newspaper in a few minutes. Stab. He stabbed a piece of meat from the plate with his fork. Part 4. Botch. I tried to cook a nice dinner, but I'm afraid I've rather botched it. Chafe. Her new shoes chafed the skin on both her feet. Dissipate. After a brisk morning wind dissipated the clouds, the sky was clear all day. The foolish son dissipated his father's fortune by spending it on drinking and gambling. Efface. The inscriptions on the ancient monuments have been effaced by time. Glint. There was a glint in her eyes that showed she was angry. Onerous. Overtime work is often onerous, though it is well paid. Iterate. The girl did not move, though the policeman iterated his command that she go. Propensity. Most boys have a propensity for playing with machinery. Singe. Mother singed chicken to get rid of hairs. Strut. The little boy put on his father's medals and strutted around the room. Unravel. There are many kinds of diseases that medical science is yet to unravel. Part 5. Bellow. He bellowed in pain when the hammer came down on his finger. Cloak. The horseback rider drew his cloak tightly around him in the rain. His friendly behavior was a cloak for his evil intention. Devout. The minister was a very devout man and devoted his whole life to Christian mission work. Guise. A man appeared at the castle gate in the guise of a woodcutter. Latent. The power of a grain of wheat to grow into a plant remains latent if it is not planted. Pawn. He pawned his watch to buy food until he could get a job. Quake. When the cannon was fired, the earth quaked under his feet. Salvage. After the ship sank, salvage of its cargo was impossible. Sequel. Famine has often been the sequel of war. Virtual. The battle was won with so great a loss of soldiers that it was a virtual defeat. Wizard. He does things that are marvelous or apparently impossible. He is a wizard. Admonish. He admonished his friend not to be late for his work. Bide. He seems to be doing nothing, but really he's just biding his time. Condone. A man who cheats on his income tax and on his expense account tends to condone these practices in his friends. Designate. I designate you to act for me while I am away. Fend. Most animals let their young fend for themselves at an early age. Hardy. Only hardy plants will survive the severe cold in the Arctic area. Limber. Baseball players do exercises at the beginning of the season in order to limber themselves up. Philanthropy. You must pay in humiliation of spirit for every benefit received at the hands of philanthropy. Recollect. Can you recollect the name of the author of Ivanhoe? Smite. He was smitten with the view that he stopped and took out his camera. Testimony. According to the testimony of the medical profession, the health of the nation is improving. Part 2. Ale. He liked the bitter taste of the ale. Beer is his favorite drink. Blend. Blend the butter and the sugar before adding other ingredients of the cake. Carnivorous. The carnivorous animals are characterized especially by large, sharp canine teeth. Denizen. The common English sparrow is a denizen of America. It was first brought from Europe to America about 1850. Frenzy. She was in a frenzy of grief when she heard that her child was missing. Incapacitate. The player's injury incapacitated him for participating in the football match. Massacre. The hunters came from the east to massacre the buffalo of the plains, killing several million in a short time. Ponder. When I asked his advice, he pondered the matter and then told me not to go. Riddle. To the riddle, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening, the answer is man. Spank. The father spanked the naughty child for his bad manners. Totter. The old man tottered across the room and sat down on the sofa. Part 3. Appease. He tried to appease the crying child by giving him candy. Catastrophe. The war was a terrible catastrophe in which many people died and many buildings were destroyed. Daunt. He felt completely daunted by the difficulties that faced him. Gape. The crowd gaped at the daring tricks performed by the tightrope walker. Duration. He will be in the hospital for the duration of the school year. Implore. We implored him to act before it was too late. Muffle. She muffled her throat in a warm scarf so as not to catch a cold. Prank. On April Fool's Day, people often play pranks on each other. Saunter. Soapy took the umbrella and sauntered off with it slowly. Trickle. There was a trickle of blood from the wound on his face. Part 4. Astound. She was astounded by the news that she had won the speech contest. Clan. The people living in that valley are all members of one clan. Distort. That man's speech distorted the truth. Entrust. While traveling, they entrusted their children to the care of a babysitter. Glutton. Sometimes he gets hungry and eats like a glutton. Invalid. Unless a check is signed, it is invalid. Invalid. He became an invalid as the result of ill health and lack of exercise. Overtone. His words were polite, but there was an overtone of anger in his voice. Probe. They probed his past career to judge his qualifications. Shrine. There are many sacred shrines in the Near East. Statute. The statute increased the taxes we must pay. Writhe. The wounded soldier writhed uncomfortably in pain. Part 5. Behold. Watching the first man land on the moon, we beheld a sight never seen before by man. Condescend. They should change this bad habit and condescend to be pleased with the common people. Dike. More than 5,000 years ago, the Chinese were controlling the Yellow River floods with dikes. The farmers dug a deep dike to carry water to the rice field. Flip. He flipped a coin on the counter to decide whether to go to the theater or not. Grizzly. My uncle, who had traveled to many countries in the world, told a grisly story about people who ate human flesh. Knave. The knaves who set fire to the barn have been caught and sent to prison. Parley. The general held a parley with the enemy's leader about exchanging prisoners. Shred. There's not a shred of evidence that the missing money was stolen. Surmise. The judge surmised his guilt. There was no proof that he killed the man. Vicissitude. The future is so uncertain that we cannot know all the vicissitudes of our fortunes. Warden. The fire warden told us not to light matches near the gas station. Abhor. Most people abhor the criminal for kidnapping the children. Boost. If you boost me up, I can reach the window easily. His friend's willingness to help him was a big boost to his morale. Detention. The jail is used for detention of persons who have been arrested. Explicit. He gave such explicit directions that everyone understood them. Invidious. Wise teachers avoid invidious rules against the students. Malign. You malign a generous person when you call him a stingy person. Potable. In places where the water is not potable, they set up purifying systems. Rue. I never went to school and I've rooted bitterly all my life. Subsist. People in the far north subsist chiefly on fish and meat. Unruly. She was such an unruly child that nobody could get along with her. Part 2. Agile. The boy had an agile mind and could come up with excuses as quickly as his mother asked for them. Caprice. His lack of money was the result of caprice in spending on unnecessary things. Disconsolate. She is disconsolate about the death of her father. Fallacy. It is a popular fallacy to suppose that riches always bring happiness. Ingenuous. She gave ingenuous answers to all of the stranger's questions. Mirage. I saw a mirage that made the highway ahead seem to be flooded with water. Preclude. The heavy thunderstorm precluded our going to the beach. Sheer. Sheer white curtains hung at the little window to let in as much light as possible. From the top of the wall, there was a sheer drop of 100 feet to the water below. Succinct. His letter was succinct, with all the major points on one page. Part 3. Arable. There is not much arable land on the side of a rocky mountain. Complacent. The winner's complacent smile annoyed the loser in the football game. Dismember. The wolves dismembered the deer's dead body with their sharp teeth. After the war, the defeated country was dismembered and could no longer be called a nation. Glee. She danced with glee when she saw the new toys which her father bought for her birthday. Implicit. He gave us implicit consent to take the apples, for he smiled when he saw us do it. Mischievous. Someone is spreading mischievous stories about the minister's private life. Redundant. In the sentence, she lives alone by herself, the word alone is redundant. Solicitude. The solicitude shown to him by his neighbors after the robbery impressed him very deeply. Surplus. The bank keeps a large surplus of money in reserve. Part 4. Abate. The doctor gave him some medicine to abate the pain. Consummate. His ambition was consummated when he won the prize. Dwindle. Our savings have dwindled since my wife was sent to hospital. Haphazard. It is a haphazard timetable. Sometimes lessons are held, and sometimes they aren't. Obvious. It is obvious that a blind man ought not to drive an automobile. Overt. I know only his overt reasons for refusing. He may have others. Rebuff. We tried to be friendly, but his rebuff made us think he wanted to be left alone. Somber. He was sad, and his thought about the future was very somber. Thwart. The boy's lack of money thwarted his plans for college. Vehement. I have a vehement hatred of people who are cruel to animals. Part 5. Benign. The benign old lady sent us a kind and warm smile. Degrade. The sergeant was degraded to private for the reason of disobeying orders. Ephemeral. My other writings are very ephemeral, but this book will be remembered forever. Illiterate. People who have never gone to school are usually illiterate. Lavish. Not every rich man is lavish in spending money. It is a mistake to lavish kindness on ungrateful people. Peddle. He is the one who is peddling the drugs unlawfully. Reprove. She reproved the maid in an angry voice for breaking the dish. Synthetic. Many kinds of fabrics, furs, and drugs are synthetic products. Unbounded. His unbounded courage and compassion made him an excellent leader of the nation. Wretched. He was wretched when he failed the entrance examination again. Blithe. She continued to work in a blithe spirit in spite of all difficulties. Dejected. She was feeling dejected and unhappy until the good news cheered her up. Erratic. He is an erratic fellow whose actions are usually completely unpredictable. Immaculate. When he was a child, his life contained noble ambitions and immaculate thought. Loathe. The little girl loathed to leave her mother for studying abroad. Pensive. The woman in this painting has a pensive smile. Retard. I was retarded from keeping an appointment by a business conference that lasted most of the day. Stalwart. She was proud of her stalwart, good-looking grandson. Shun. During his illness, he shunned all society, and in particular those who had been his dearest friends. Part 2. Audible. They quarreled with such a loud noise that their voices were audible to the neighbors. Auspicious. The new boy had an auspicious first day in the elementary school. Elation. She was filled with elation at the news that she won the first prize in her class. Haughty. The haughty man thinks highly of himself while holding others in contempt. Jeopardy. The officer's violation of a regulation is more of a jeopardy than the enlisted man's offense. Mandatory. It is mandatory to pay a debt within a certain period of time. Rebuke. The teacher rebuked the student for throwing the examination paper on the floor. Sparse. Not many people came to see the game. The sparse crowd was scattered thinly through the stadium. Undue. A miser gives undue importance to making and saving money. Part 3. Allay. The doctor's friendly manner helped the patient allay his fear. Carnal. Gluttony and drunkenness have been called carnal vices. Defunct. A family name becomes defunct when the only heir dies without any son. Feasible. Of the many plans submitted, the committee selected the plan that seemed most feasible. Ingenuity. The boy showed ingenuity in making toys out of scraps of discarded wood. Mirth. My joke caused a great deal of mirth among the little children. Precarious. Soldiers on the battlefield lead a precarious life. Preordain. Some people believe that fate has preordained whether they will be happy or unhappy. Taciturn. At the council board, he was taciturn and never opened his lips. Venomous. His eldest brother died after the venomous bite from the rattlesnake. Part 4. Amiss. The doctor said there was nothing amiss with her. Comprise. This anthology comprises samples from the work of 10 authors. Dissemble. Families that quarrel in the privacy of the home do well to dissemble when they go out to dinner. Glib. A glib door-to-door salesman sold her a set of books that she did not want. Invincible. Before World War II, the French thought their Maginot Line as an invincible bulwark against German invasion. Perfunctory. The lazy little boy gave his face a perfunctory washing. Replete. The Disneyland tour was replete with unexpected thrills and suspense. Solicit. We respectfully solicit your continuous friendship and patronage. Thraldom. The nation will soon be liberated from the foulest thraldom. Wilt. Give the flowers some water regularly, or they will wilt. Part 5. Abominable. That abominable place was so dirty and evil-smelling that he turned away in disgust. Brainy. Brainy students could understand easily what the teacher explained to them. Deteriorate. As the morning progressed, the weather deteriorated more and more. Exquisite. In German, he was an exquisite stylist, and he brought to that language a new sensitivity in the art of storytelling. Incurable. Cancer is no longer an incurable disease nowadays. It can be remedied by using radioactivity. Manual. Manual workers often earn more than office workers. This workbook has a teacher's manual in which examination problems and their answers are included. Potential. He is a potential leader to control this large state. Ruthless. They are such ruthless parents that they never give presents to the children on Christmas Day. Voluble. Her explanations for failure to do the work were voluble, but not easily believed. Vociferous. Theater lobbies were filled with a vociferous crowd during the intermission. Bleak. The weather in early December was bleak and unpleasant. Castigate. The electric inspector was castigated for having failed to check the wire as he was supposed to. Enmity. We should overcome the worst that the tyrant's enmity can do. Impartial. In any case, Parents should be impartial toward each of their children. Lucid. The teacher asked me to give a lucid explanation of my being late for class. The old man is confused most of the time, but he does have lucid moments. Perpendicular. A square has four 90-degree angles made by its four perpendicular sides. Retrospect. In retrospect, many good opportunities were neglected in my life. Sagacity. The politician showed a good sagacity in avoiding the mistakes he'd made in the previous campaign. Urbane. Urbane speech is educated speech, as distinguished from the speech of the ignorant. Part 2. Ardent. After reading about the lives of several great Americans, John became an ardent student of American history. Derogatory. I can't bear his derogatory remarks about my brother's character. Discretion. I won't tell you what time to leave. You're old enough to use your own discretion. The house of the meetings will be fixed at the chairman's discretion. Hilarious. The party got quite hilarious after they brought more wine. Paramount. It is a paramount responsibility of every officer to take care of his men before caring for himself. Recede. Houses and trees seem to recede as we ride past in a train. Rife. The whole city was rife with rumors of political corruption and bribery. Spontaneous. Both sides burst into spontaneous cheers at the magician's skillful tricks. Tenuous. The air 10 miles above the earth is very tenuous. Part 3. Acme. A baseball player usually reaches the acme of his skills before he is 30. Candor. He spared no one's feelings and expressed his views with great candor. Dissuade. The father finally dissuaded his son from leaving school. Gratuitous. Her advice was quite gratuitous. I can think for myself. Impeach. The House of Representatives has the sole power to impeach an officer of the United States government. Ostensible. Her ostensible purpose was to borrow some sugar, but she really wanted to see her neighbor's new furniture. Paltry. The poor painter sold his paintings for a paltry sum of money. Sordid. The poor family lived in a sordid log cabin in the valley. Tidy. She makes it a rule to keep her room neat and tidy after coming back from school. Part 4. Aloof. One tall boy stood aloof from all the small children. Cardinal. Regular meals and exercise are of cardinal importance to our health. Drab. There are many drab houses in the smoky mining town. The life of a person who never does anything is dull and drab. Feud. The two families have been at feud with each other for 3 generations. Insolent. His insolent speech and behavior upset everyone in the room. Mitigate. The judge said that nothing could mitigate the cruelty with which the man had treated the child. Pertinent. A summary of the events leading up to this situation would be pertinent information. Predecessor. His predecessor quit because he was not in the least interested in this kind of job. Tardy. Let me apologize for my being tardy in answering your letter. Wet. You'd think she would never climb again after falling down the mountain, but it just whetted her appetite. Part 5. Acquit. The man accused of stealing the money was acquitted for lack of witnesses. Brittle. Be careful not to break the box of glass. That thin glass is hard but brittle. Detract. The ugly frame detracts from the beauty of the famous picture. Extirpate. To extirpate weeds is not only to destroy their visible parts, but to pull them out by the roots. Indulgent. The indulgent mother bought her children everything they wanted. The indulgent teacher praised every poem we wrote. Mendacious. The mendacious beggar told a different tale of woe at every house. Plausible. For my own sake, I've told a plausible lie at the club meeting, but the members did not believe me at all. Sanction. We have the sanction of the recreation department to play ball in this park. Shallow. Youngsters usually rush into marriage with only the shallow notions of what love and responsibility mean. Verge. We parked the car on the grass verge at the side of the highway. Adjacent. No one in the adjacent apartments was awakened by their quarreling sounds. Calamity. The spring floods were a great calamity to the farmers whose crops and houses were ruined. Devastate. The floods and storms, which have no precedent in the recorded history, devastated the country. Exultant. The exultant players were dancing on the ground over their team's victory. Inexhaustible. The wealth of our country seems inexhaustible to many people abroad. Maudlin. We saw a maudlin movie about an orphan who lost his parents in the war. Plunder. The enemies plundered all the valuable things they could find in the village. Scrupulous. A scrupulous man never fails to give back the borrowed money to its owner. Sundry. From sundry hints, I guessed I was to be given a bicycle for my birthday present. Zealous. The children made zealous efforts to clean up the house for the Christmas party. Part 2. Altruistic. We wonder if human beings are primarily altruistic or selfish. Clamor. The children were clamoring for candy. Disintegrate. The old manuscripts had disintegrated into a pile of fragments and dust. Forbear. Although Napoleon was Corsican, he is considered by most modern Frenchmen to have been French as their own forebears. Intact. The money was returned intact by the boy who found it on the street. Molest. We did not molest the big dog because we were afraid of him. Profuse. The mourner's profuse tears at the burial were heartbreaking. Slack. He was slack in fulfilling his promises and responsibilities. Tart. Tart apples taste sharp and are pleasantly acidic in their taste. Viable. This plan looks all right in principle, but in practice it wouldn't be viable. Part 3. Aslant. The carpenter made the roof aslant to allow water to run down. Concede. They conceded that victory was no longer attainable and agreed to a negotiated surrender. Distrust. She could not allow the stranger to enter her house, for she distrusted him. Groggy. The table is very groggy. I think the leg is going to fall off. Intrepid. The intrepid fireman saved people trapped in a burning building, disregarding his own safety. Overbearing. We found it hard to like the boy because of his overbearing manners. Rash. Only a rash person would have rushed into the burning house to save some clothes. Sporadic. Though polio has been practically wiped out, there have been sporadic cases of the disease. Toxic. Fumes from automobiles and factory chimneys are toxic. Part 4. Avert. The driver averted an accident by a quick turn of the steering wheel. Deduce. Mother deduced from my loss of appetite what had happened to the cookies. Embark. Our ship embarked passengers and wool at an Australian port. After leaving college, the young man embarked on a new business career. Humiliate. The boy humiliated his parents by behaving badly in front of the guests. Jovial. A gregarious man, he enjoyed the companionship of a large number of jovial friends. Pastime. Baseball has been called America's national pastime through 4 seasons. Renounce. The prince renounced his right to the throne. Snug. My grandmother likes to read a newspaper in a snug corner near the fireplace. Umpteen. She doesn't need to borrow a book because she's got umpteen books waiting to be read at home. Part 5. Blur. The boy blurred the picture by touching it before the paint was dry. Demolish. The slums were demolished before the town was extended. Enslave. Education makes people easy to govern, but impossible to enslave. Impede. Many a man is impeded in his career by a lack of belief in himself. Lull. The mother lulled the baby to sleep by singing a song. Plaintiff. In the court, the plaintiff asserted that the thief had stolen $200 from his store. Robust. He was strong and healthy, but he's never been robust since his illness. Strenuous. We had a strenuous day moving into our new house. Vitiate. Pollution from smoke and dust vitiates the air. All his attempts to improve were vitiated by his lack of willpower. Aggrieve. The entire population was aggrieved by the tyranny of the king. Callous. Only a callous person can see suffering without trying to relieve it. Walking barefoot on the asphalt pavement makes the bottom of your feet callous. Disapprove. She wants to continue her study in the United States, but her parents disapprove of her plan. Fabulous. $10 is a fabulous price for an ordinary pencil. Infuriate. He was infuriated by the policeman's rough treatment of his wife. Mordant. His political opponents feared his mordant tongue, and even more his mordant pen. Prowess. The Indians sang a song of victory, describing their prowess in battle. Subversive. He was arrested as a member of a subversive organization. Temporary. Many students find temporary jobs during their summer holidays. Part 2. Amass. Through the years, he amassed a large fortune to buy a farm after he retired. Colossal. The Empire State Building is a colossal structure. Dismal. Sickness or bad luck often makes a person feel dismal. Genial. She was glad to see us again and gave me a genial welcome. Inveterate. It is hard for an inveterate smoker to give up tobacco. Offense. The punishment for that offense is 2 years in prison. Sojourn. During his sojourn in Africa, he learned much about native customs. Turmoil. 6 robberies in one night put our village in a turmoil. Suspend. A scientist suspends judgment and refrains from drawing conclusions until all the facts are in. Part 3. Assent. She assented to the doctor's assertion that her son was ill, but could not consent to having him hospitalized. Cozy. The couple wished to live in a cozy little home rather than in a big mansion. Diversify. That factory is trying to diversify its products to sell in different markets. Haggard. The haggard faces of the rescued miners showed that they had a great deal of suffering. Irreparable. Careless drivers cause many irreparable accidents. Paternal. Everyone has 2 paternal grandparents and 2 maternal grandparents. Replica. The young artist made a replica of the famous painting. Seclusion. His seclusion of the rabbit in the barn was kept secret from everyone else. Wrangle. The 2 friends wrangled, and now they don't speak to each other. Part 4. Bigoted. Most bigoted people are intolerant of opposition. Deficient. Most of the food they eat is deficient in iron and protein. Elude. The sly fox eluded the hunters by running back in the opposite direction. Ignoble. Some very great men have come from ignoble families. Kindred. We are studying about dew, frost, mist, and other kindred facts of nature. Melancholy. During the Romantic period, it was fashionable in literature to have a melancholy outlook on the world. Poltroon. No one likes to be regarded as a poltroon. Rout. The enemy was routed. Vulnerable. The most massive defense system would still leave the nation vulnerable to nuclear attack. Part 5. Abide. The child abided with his grandparents for 3 years before being returned to his parents. Boisterous. The audience in the theater was irritated by the unruly and boisterous children. Despicable. To spit in the classroom is despicable. Exotic. We saw many exotic plants at the flower exhibition, which we had never seen before. Imperative. For the mountain climber, it is imperative to get food and water before sunset. My wife has such an imperative voice that everyone obeys her. Nonplus. He was nonplussed by the strange customs he saw everywhere in the country. Pompous. The leader of the band bowed in a pompous manner. Sever. He severed connection with Tom. Sultry. The day was so sultry that they had little energy left. Wane. The moon was waning, and in such a waning light, it is very difficult to see the enemy. Acclimate. We are becoming acclimated to New York weather. Assail. The senators assailed the president on the subject of the treaty between the two countries. Congest. His face was congested with anger as the argument grew more heated. Effusive. Her effusive welcome made us feel most uncomfortable. Frugal. A good manager is frugal in the use of his funds. Insolvent. The newspapers accused the government of being insolvent in its debts. Nausea. Most passengers of the ship were seized with nausea during the storm at sea. Redeem. She had no way to redeem her furniture out of pawn. Seep. They used waterproof cement to prevent water from seeping through the roof of the tunnel. Symmetry. A swollen cheek spoiled the symmetry of his handsome face. Part 2. Aggravate. New York's hot weather is often aggravated by its humidity. Balmy. A balmy breeze was blowing across the beautiful lake. Culmination. The culmination of the doctor's life's work was his discovery of a cure for cancer. Endorse. The storekeeper endorsed my bill when I paid the full amount. Hygiene. The main field of hygiene is concerned with healthy living and cleanliness. Intangible. Sound is intangible, and the same is true of light. Oblivious. Grandfather sat by the fireplace, oblivious of everything around him. Rite. The funeral will be performed according to church rites. Simulate. Her story was boring, but he simulated interest to please her. Transcribe. The account of the trial was transcribed from the stenographer's shorthand notes. Part 3. Annex. Outlying districts were annexed by the city. Brew. Some people brew beer at home for home use. The boys whispering in the corner are brewing some mischief. Deride. The boys derided him for his fear of the darkness. Evaluate. She always evaluates people by their clothes. Imminent. Swept along by the swift current, he was in imminent danger of going over the waterfall. Judicious. A judicious historian selects and weighs facts carefully and critically. Preponderance. There is a preponderance of hot days in July and August. Sage. Many sage staffs around the commander helped him win the battle. Spectre. Some superstitious people said that the specter of the murdered man haunted the house. Tumult. The shout of fire caused a great tumult in the theater. Part 4. Apathy. Her apathy since her husband's death worries her children. Collide. If the aims of two countries collide, there may be a war. Drape. The buildings were draped with red, white, and blue bunting. Fatuous. After his boring speech for over an hour, the fatuous speaker waited for applause from the audience. Impudent. The impudent boy made faces at the teacher. Meditate. I could have given a much better answer if I had had enough time to meditate. Purify. This music seems to purify one's spirit of evil thoughts. Sagacious. A sagacious businessman seldom fails in his business. Suave. The secretary's beautiful figure and suave manners made the office bright. Vigilance. The watchman who caught the thief was praised for his vigilance. Accelerate. The engineer accelerates a train by turning on more power. Averse. I will keep it secret. I feel averse to telling it to someone. Corroborate. Two persons who saw the road accident corroborated the driver's statement. Encamp. It took the soldiers only half an hour to encamp in the heavy rain. Humid. The air is very humid near the sea or large lake. Irrigation. It is impossible to make plants grow in a desert without irrigation. Preeminent. Every baseball player envies him, for he is preeminent above all his rivals for pitching. Rudiment. Everyone learns the rudiments of arithmetic in elementary school. Stifle. When they got in the boiler room, they were almost stifled by the heat. Versatile. He is a very versatile performer. He can act, sing, dance, and play the piano. Part 2. Anatomy. The anatomy of an earthworm is much simpler than that of a man. Brawn. Football requires brain as well as brawn. Dexterity. Dexterity in questioning the witnesses helped the lawyer win many cases. Erupt. Mount Vesuvius hasn't erupted for a good many years. Hypothesis. Let's discuss this topic on the hypothesis that it is true. Manipulate. To drive an automobile, you must learn how to manipulate the steering wheel and pedals. Prowess. The tribesmen sang a song of victory, describing their prowess in battle. Scrupulous. A less scrupulous man wouldn't give the money back to its owner. The nurse treated the wounded soldiers with the most scrupulous care. Suffice. $100 a month will suffice for the old lady's need. Part 3. Antique. He really likes antique art much more than modern art. Coherent. In coherent writing, every sentence is connected in thought to the previous sentence. Doze. After dinner, my father often dozes in his chair for a while. Fascinate. The actress's beauty and cleverness fascinated everyone in the room. Innovate. Some people like to innovate the old systems and traditions. Others like to preserve them. Mystify. The magician's tricks mystify the audience in the theater. Recur. Leap year recurs every 4 years, and in that year, February has 29 days. Shimmer. The sky was clear, and moonlight was shimmering on the lake. Technicality. The general explained the military technicalities of the matter to the newspaper reporters. Part 4. Articulate. A baby cries and gurgles but does not use articulate speech. Articulate. The speaker was careful to articulate his words so that everyone in the hall could understand him. Confront. The soldiers were confronted by 2 terrorists as they left their camp. Ecstasy. While she was waiting for her boyfriend in the tea room, a sweet melody filled her with ecstasy. Foster. The mother tried to foster her son's interest in music by taking him to concerts frequently. Irradiate. The hall is not dim. The 4 large lamps irradiate it. Obstinate. The obstinate man would go his own way, in spite of all warning. Repugnant. Some people eat foods that are repugnant to others. Soporific. After his soporific speech for an hour, the speaker received no applause from the audience. Triumph. The conquest of outer space is one of the greatest triumphs of modern science. Abound. Our nation abounds in opportunities for well-educated young men and women. Arrogant. He behaved in such arrogant manners in his firm that he was at last fired. Compile. It takes a long time as well as many experts working together to compile an encyclopedia. Entreat. The murderer entreated the judge to show mercy, but was sentenced to death. Filth. The alley was filled with lots of garbage and other filth. Incumbent. It is incumbent on you to give a father's advice before your son leaves home. Monotony. At sea, everything that breaks the monotony of the surrounding expanse attracts attention. Reciprocate. I hope I can reciprocate your hospitality sometime. Shaggy. The shaggy dog always sleeps in the bed with her. Tribulation. Hunger, cold, and sickness were among the tribulations of pioneer life. Part 2. Adolescent. He read many books in the adolescent stage of his life. One who is 15 years old is not an adult, but an adolescent. Autocratic. Adolf Hitler commanded autocratic power. No one could rigorously oppose his plans or decisions. Congenial. All the furniture of the room was very congenial to my taste. Encumber. The room was encumbered with heavy furniture. Horrify. The little girl was horrified by the scary story. Manifest. It is now manifest that if you don't return the book to the library right now, you will have to pay a late fine. Nutrition. Good health is not always obtained by good nutrition. Repress. They could repress the uprising with the help of the army. Smuggle. They were accused of smuggling diamonds from foreign countries. Tangible. There has been a tangible improvement in his schoolwork. Part 3. Analogy. The teacher drew an analogy between the human heart and a pump. Billow. The ship was tossed by the ocean billows in the storm. Detonate. The bomb was detonated from several miles away. It caused no damage to our town. Entangle. The fly became entangled in the spider's web. Hibernate. During long, severe winters, some animals, such as badgers, ground squirrels, and some insects, hibernate. Intuition. By experience with all kinds of people, the doctor has developed great powers of intuition. Pollute. Many rivers in that city are polluted with filthy waste from factories. Revere. She reveres her grandfather. He is strict in decision, but shows great affection to her. Solitary. The hermit led a solitary life in the deep mountains, far away from the town. Valor. They owed their lives to the valor of the firemen. Part 4. Antagonist. The brave knight defeated each antagonist who came against him. Cognizant. As the doctor was fully cognizant of the patient's serious condition, he acted swiftly to relieve it. Doleful. His doleful expression showed that he had failed in the examination. Facility. The facility of communication is far greater now than it was 100 years ago. A free bus to the airport is a facility offered only by this hotel. Improvise. He improvised a new stanza for the school song at the football game. Inquisitive. The old lady was very inquisitive about what her neighbors were doing. Protrude. The policeman stopped the man when he saw a gun protruding from his pocket. Savor. He used to say that argument adds a savor to conversation. Subvert. Much of the city was subverted by the earthquake and a great fire. Addict. He is addicted to alcohol and drugs. Addict. Doctors and policemen disagree on how to control drug distribution and handle addicts. Assiduous. He is assiduous at his studies. He works hard and steadily and pays continual attention to his teacher. Conspire. The two men conspired to steal the jewels and then sell them to a jeweler in another country. Elusive. He is such an elusive person. You never know where he is when you want him. Gaudy. A cheap, gaudy steamboat arrived at the wharf from St. Louis. Ignite. He ignited the match by scratching it on the deck. Negotiate. The trade union is negotiating with the employers to get a better contract. Respiration. Respiration is difficult at great heights, and some mountaineers wear oxygen masks to overcome such difficulty. Spice. The speaker made a few funny jokes to add spice to his speech. Unanimous. The proposal was accepted with unanimous approval by the committee. Part 2. Aggregate. The power of the Allies aggregated together was great, though individually some were quite weak. His various wages for the year aggregated $22,000. Banal. Their conversation was banal, full of uninteresting remarks, such as, nice weather, and slow traffic today. Curative. Taking a rest in the mountains is very curative for breathing difficulties. Enforce. The robbers enforced obedience to their demand by threat of violence. Hypocrite. No one in the village likes the man because he is a shameless hypocrite. Intercept. It is illegal to intercept a letter or parcel before it is delivered. Persecute. Some early religious leaders were persecuted by their enemies. Sarcasm. Don't hurry, said her father in sarcasm as she slowly dressed. Superfluous. We have enough food for the picnic. Any more would be superfluous. Vindicate. The report of the Committee of Inquiry completely vindicates him and declares his action to have been right and proper. Part 3. Animate. A smile animated her face as she went to the gate to meet her husband. Animate. Many scientists now believe that there are some worlds in outer space having animate beings. Chivalry. Chivalry includes bravery, loyalty, honor, courtesy, respect for women, protection of the weak, and generosity. Diagnosis. A doctor cannot treat an illness until he has made a diagnosis. Exemplify. The teacher exemplified the use of the word for the students. Impend. When a war impends, wise men try to prevent it in advance. Modulate. The speaker had a really noble voice, which he could modulate with great skill. Prophecy. The teacher's prophecy that the boy would become a great national leader was later fulfilled. Sensuous. After hard work, we could feel the sensuous delight of a hot bath. Tact. A minister of foreign affairs who lacks tact is a dangerous man. Vindictive. The vindictive little girl tore up her sister's papers. Part 4. Append. If you hand in your report late, append a note explaining the reason for the delay. Communal. The Plains Indian has a plentiful and regular supply of meat and skins by the communal buffalo hunting. Ecology. After learning ecology, I could see the relation of living things to their environment and to each other. Forbear. He's deserved to be punished several times, but I've forborne from doing so. Indifference. It was a matter of indifference to him whether his hands were clean or dirty. Mediocre. He was a mediocre student. His academic records were not excellent, but not bad either. Rehearse. He rehearsed the story of all his sufferings in prison. We rehearsed our parts for the school play. Singular. It is unwise to make yourself so singular in your clothes. Transient. My mood is only transient. It will go away pretty soon. Adhere. The two surfaces adhered to each other, and we couldn't get them apart. Audacity. He had the audacity to go to the party without being invited. Contiguity. The contiguity of the house and the garage was a convenience in bad weather. Enchant. The witch had enchanted the princess so that she would sleep for a month. Grandeur. As he watched the Niagara Falls, he thought of the grandeur of nature. Infer. From her story, we inferred that they went to the United States unwillingly. Numb. I cannot write a letter. My fingers are numb with cold. Remit. Please remit the amount of your bill by check. The girl was accused of stealing a pair of shoes, but because of her young age, the judge remitted the prison sentence. Skeptical. His skeptical remark about the team's chances of winning made us gloomy. Urban. The urban population of China has greatly increased during the last several years. Part 2. Amputate. This is serious. I am afraid we'll have to amputate his leg. Body. All the people in the party were disgusted with his body jokes. Deformity. She is very attractive in spite of her slight deformity. Excavate. It took a long time to excavate the ancient city of Troy. Harass. In olden times, the coasts of England were frequently harassed by the Vikings. Intoxicate. He does not drink at all. A little wine may intoxicate him. Placid. The placid lake reflected the image of the old castle. Retaliate. Mary kicked Susan, and Susan retaliated against her by biting. Stealthy. The cat found a bird sitting on the branch and crept with stealthy movements toward it. Wary. He lied to me about my friend, and I have been very wary of him ever since. Part 3. Annihilate. 3 survivors told us in detail how the regiment was annihilated by the enemy. Chronological. In telling a story, we usually follow chronological order. Divert. They are planning to divert the river to supply water somewhere else. Enhance. The moonlight on the lake enhanced the beauty of the scene. Imprison. The criminal has been imprisoned in a dark cell for almost 10 years. Malice. Do not bear malice toward him. He is a good man by nature. Prosecute. The driver was prosecuted for exceeding the speed limit on the expressway. He started an inquiry into the cause of the fire and prosecuted it for several weeks. Satirical. We were all amused by the satirical comparison of life at college and in the army. Subscribe. They subscribed to a monthly magazine in addition to several daily newspapers. He subscribed a large amount of money to the college for the hospital. Weird. We heard a weird shriek from the darkness of the ruined castle. Part 4. Apprehend. A guilty man apprehends danger in every sound. The thief who had stolen the jewels was apprehended by the police and was put in jail. Commute. She commutes from Cambridge to London every day. Emit. Heat and smoke emitted by the fire made it difficult for the firemen to put it out. Fortify. The soldiers fortified the position on the hill by building earthworks and erecting long walls. Inflict. The government inflicted excessively heavy income taxes on the people. Mimic. She cut and painted pieces of paper that mimicked flowers so well that some people thought they were real. Reassure. Her calm voice reassured the frightened child, and he felt much better. Serial. An exciting new serial story will begin in our next week's issue. Tactics. The tactics of pretending to cross the river and of making a retreat fooled the enemy. Adversity. He who never was acquainted with adversity has seen the world but on one side. Blister. My new shoes have made blisters on my heels. Clatter. The clatter of metal plates was heard from the kitchen. Digital. Most of telephone dials use digital numbers. Gash. He cannot work today. He got a gash in his hand while axing. Impunity. For 20 years, the same political party has run that country with absolute impunity. Manure. Plants grow much faster and stronger when they are given manure. Porous. Glass is not porous, and it doesn't allow liquid to pass through. Shack. There are a lot of shacks in the rundown part of the town near the railroad. Span. The average lifespan of people has increased considerably since the 19th century. Twitch. The strong winds twitched the paper out of her hand. Part 2. Armistice. November 11th is the Armistice Day of World War I. Breach. It would be a breach of duty for the guard to leave before his replacement comes. Comedy. To help a new student get oriented furthers the comity of the school. Dungeon. Some prisoners in the dungeon will be released tomorrow. Gregarious. He is a gregarious man. He enjoys the companionship of a large number of friends. Incur. The explorers incurred great dangers when they tried to cross the rapids. Mole. She has a small mole on the left side of her nose. The mole digs holes in passages underground and makes its home in them. Patent. He has applied for a patent on his latest invention. Sip. This coffee is very hot. Do not drink it quickly, but sip it. Sulfur. Sulfur is found abundantly in volcanic regions. Upsurge. This year's upsurge in rice production is due to the new method of cultivation. Part 3. Austere. Grandfather was an austere man. He used to be silent and very strict to us. Bouquet. When I was in hospital, she called on me with a bouquet of roses in her hand. Coral. In the Pacific Ocean, there are many coral atolls that are ring-like islands. Forum. A group of schoolmasters are holding a forum on new ways of teaching history. Gym. On rainy days, the students play games in the gym. Interject. Not like that, he interjected while explaining how to take the machine into pieces. Mushroom. Some mushrooms are good to eat. Some, such as toadstools, are poisonous. Raft. They escaped from the wrecked ship on a raft. Smear. The children looked like black people. Their faces were smeared with soot. Taper. One end of a pencil is tapered off to a point. Via. I have read this French play via an English translation. Part 4. Barometer. Newspapers are often called barometers of public opinion. Comply. He complied with the doctor's order that should take a rest at home. Coxcomb. A coxcomb spends too much money and time on his clothes and appearance. Foliage. In summer, the house next door is hidden in luxuriant foliage. Hegira. She made her plan for her annual summer hegira to the Miami beach. Lair. The hunters traced the footmarks of a tiger, and at last they found him in his lair. Nightmare. The child had a terrible nightmare and awoke crying. Reservoir. This reservoir is large enough to supply water to the entire city. Sod. He bought some sod to put in the bare spots of his lawn. Trash. Rake up the trash in the yard and burn it. We will have some guests tonight. Warehouse. The furniture will stay in the warehouse until they pay the storage cost. Part 5. Belch. The volcano belched a staggering amount of fire, smoke, and ashes. Chore. It's such a chore to do the shopping every day. Crimson. When she was asked a sudden question, her face turned crimson in embarrassment. Fugitive. The fugitive had already packed and bought his ticket. Horde. Two women were quarreling on the street, surrounded by a horde of people. Linguist. Usually, a linguist is skilled in a number of languages besides his own. Petroleum. The price of the petroleum has been raised too high during the last few years. Rumple. Mary rumpled her dress by sitting on the floor. Sneeze. People sneeze when they have a cold. Twine. She twined her arms around his neck and kissed him. Whir. When we got inside the factory, we couldn't hear the guide explain because of the whirring of the motors. Alloy. An alloy is often harder, lighter, and stronger than the pure metals of which it is composed. Blackout. The streets were not lighted at night during the blackout. Cater. Who is supposed to cater for your daughter's wedding next week? Cram. He is cramming facts and dates for his history examination tomorrow. He crammed as many candy bars into his pockets as they would hold. Fleece. If you paid $200 for the watch, you were fleeced. I saw it in a department store for $70. Habitat. The jungle is the natural habitat of wild animals and plants. Locksmith. I lost my key to the door, and I went to the locksmith to get a new one. Pant. He panted excitedly, giving us the news as he had just heard it. Rickety. Don't use that old cart, it's rickety. Stigmatize. He has been stigmatized as a coward and liar. Unquenchable. Having been in the desert without water for 2 days, his thirst was unquenchable. Part 2. Astronaut. The astronauts of the United States are returning to the Earth from the moon. Bequeath. One age bequeaths its knowledge to the next. Census. In the United States, there is a census every 10 years. Crusade. Everyone of the city was asked to join the crusade for better housing. Ford. The stream was so deep that we could not ford it. Hover. The dog hovers around the kitchen door every mealtime. Masquerade. They were all dressed up to attend the masquerade. He got a free ticket to the play by masquerading as a friend of the actors. Phoenix. The phoenix is believed to live for 500 years and then burns itself to be born again from the ashes. Rye. Some people prefer the dark bread made from rye to the white bread made from wheat. Stunt. In the film, he jumps off a running car and performs other dangerous stunts. Versus. The most exciting game in hockey was Harvard versus Yale. Part 3. Artillery. Above all, the artillery was the deciding factor in the battle. Bounty. In the early days of the West, many states paid a bounty for captured criminals. Clench. When he got a shot against typhus, the child clenched his teeth in pain. Dirk. I saw a burglar with a dirk in his hand, getting into the room where she was sleeping. Gallows. The murderer entreated the judge for mercy, but was sentenced to the gallows. Inedible. My steak, though delicious, was mostly fat and bones. Most of it was inedible. Morale. The morale of the football team was very low after its defeat. Prone. We are more prone to make mistakes when we are tired. We fell prone to the ground and drank water from the spring. Scuttle. The robbers grasped the peril of their position and scuttled away. Tack. The carpet was fastened to the floor with tacks. Ward. After his parents' death, the court made him a ward of his aunt. Part 4. Avalanche. The terrible avalanche buried the whole village, and very few people survived it. Briefcase. I was so in a hurry that I left my briefcase at home. Commodious. The apartment is not commodious enough for his family to live in. Dynasty. The Bourbon dynasty ruled France for more than 200 years. Gibberish. After he got out of the bar, he suddenly began to yell drunken gibberish on the sidewalk. Invoke. I invoked his forgiveness many times, but failed to move him. Myriad. There are myriads of stars in the sky at night. We cannot count them. Quarry. Thousands of men and women are working in the quarry to get stones for use in building the castle. Slum. Poverty and disease are common in the slums. Tinkle. He tinkled his coins together in his pocket. Whirlpool. The swimmer caught in the whirlpool struggled to keep from drowning. Part 5. Blockade. We ended our blockade of the enemy's port when peace was established. Burrow. The fox likes to live in a burrow. It's warm in winter and cool in summer. Corollary. Destruction and suffering are corollaries of war. Fawn. Many flattering relatives fawned on the rich old man. Grope. He groped for the light switch in the dark basement. Latch. He turned the latch of the door and opened it so gently. Nostalgia. The soldiers were filled with nostalgia by hearing my old favorite song. Resound. The notes of the hunting horn resounded through the forest. Splinter. The firemen splintered the locked door with an axe to save the boy in the room. No one in the plane survived the crash. It crashed down into splinters. Truce. A truce was declared at Christmas between the two armies. Vernacular. There is not a single grammar book on the vernacular of this African tribe. Anesthetic. The use of anesthetics is less than 100 years old. Beacon. The fire on the hill was a beacon to the villagers that the enemy was coming. Coroner. The coroner concluded that the death of the old woman was accidental. Duel. They decided to settle their quarrel by a duel. Graft. Peach trees can be grafted on plum trees. Impersonal. First come, first served is an impersonal remark. Loom. The large iceberg loomed through the thick gray fog. Peal. As the speaker made a funny joke, peals of laughter rang through the auditorium. Roundup. The missing cattle are discovered in the annual roundup. Straggle. The cowboys worked all night to gather the cattle that had straggled behind the rest of the herd. Ulterior. He was suspected of having ulterior motives for making his generous offer. But in fact, his offer was from the bottom of his heart. Part 2. Auction. The old Chippendale chair was sold at a good price at the auction. Calligraphy. The old man is famous for superb calligraphy. Cope. Jean felt unable to cope with driving in heavy traffic after her accident. Cucumber. Please get some cucumbers in the vegetable section. I'll make pickles. Gruel. Her grandfather is 90 years old, and every mealtime she has to prepare gruel for him by boiling oatmeal in water. Hustle. She hustled off her children to school and started working. Maneuver. Every year, the Army and the Navy hold maneuvers for practice. She maneuvered her car into a narrow parking space with ease. Plight. He was in a terrible plight, trapped at the back of the cave. Scoff. I came to the meeting to scoff, but the speaker persuaded me. Stun. She was stunned by the news of her mother's death. Vulture. A vulture usually lives on the flesh of dead animals. Part 3. Bankrupt. After his store burned, the storekeeper became a bankrupt. Cavern. It suddenly began to shower, and we took refuge in the cavern. Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum usually bloom in fall and show great varieties in the size and color of its flower. Fishery. The inhabitants of the port are occupied mainly with fishery. Gust. In a gust of uncontrollable anger, he broke the picture into pieces. Ingratiate. She tried to ingratiate herself with the teacher by offering some precious gifts. Munition. The reason why we lost the war was not just because of a shortage of munitions. Prostrate. The wretched slaves prostrated themselves before their master. Smolder. The campfire smoldered for several hours after the blaze died down. Tattoo. The hail beat a loud tattoo on the window pane. Wield. In a democratic system, it is the people that wield the power. Part 4. Allude. In his letter, he alluded to me a matter which I had completely forgotten. Chisel. A chisel and a hammer are indispensable tools for a sculptor. Cricket. Male crickets make a chirping noise by rubbing their front wings together. Flit. As we stepped into the bush, birds flitted from tree to tree. High-handed. It was rather high-handed to punish the child for the accident. Lag. The child lagged behind others because he was very tired. Naughty. You naughty boy. I told you not to play on the road. Rattle. We used to hear the rattle of the milk bottles in the early morning. Soot. Soot is caused by incomplete burning and makes smoke dark. Tributary. The Ohio River is one of the tributaries of the Mississippi River. Undo. The workmen mended the road, but a heavy storm undid their work. The children began to undo the string round the parcel to see what was in it. Part 5. Belabor. The rider belabored his tired horse with a stick. Circumference. After dinner, they walked around the circumference of the lake. Devolve. In case of failure of direct descendants, the throne devolves upon the nearest prince. Fret. Don't fret too much, everything will be all right. Honk. The wild geese honked high in the autumn sky. Levy. The government decided to levy a tax on tobacco. It had been free from tax. Override. The new rule overrides all the previous ones. Rally. The scattered soldiers were rallied in the vale for the next attack. Sprawl. Many people sprawled on the beach in their bathing suits. Trudge. The old man trudged through the deep snow back towards home. Ambush. The soldiers lay in ambush, waiting for the signal to open fire. The major ambushed his troops in the woods on both sides of the road. Brag. He is always bragging about what he can do with a car. Cleanse. Be sure that you cleanse the wound before bandaging it. Discourse. The professor will deliver a discourse on the poetic style of John Keats. Foxhole. In World War II, the general made it a point of pride to dig his own foxhole. Inflammation. The inflammation of his knee made it difficult for him to walk. Lever. The huge stone is so heavy that we cannot move it without a lever. Notation. In arithmetic, we use the Arabic notation 1, 2, 3, and so on, or sometimes the Roman notation 1, 2, 3, and so on. Ransom. A large ransom was asked for the safe return of the child. Sop. He sopped a piece of bread in milk. It was too crisp to eat. Tingle. His cheek tingled from the slap she had given him. Part 2. Armament. A large percentage of the budget is for armaments. Brunch. On Sunday, she gets up late in the morning and has a brunch around 10:30. Coffin. His coffin was laid to rest in a deep grave. Envision. The mother envisioned her little girl as a prima ballerina. Gangster. The gangster who had taken part in the robbery was arrested by the police. Illegible. The ink had faded so that many words were illegible. Malcontent. The rebellion was started by some malcontents who had been dissatisfied with the policy. Pavilion. We will take a rest in the pavilion until the game starts. Shroud. The prisoners escaped out of the jail under the shroud of night. Spurt. The room soon filled with the water spurting from the broken pipe. Varnish. He put varnish on the tabletop to protect it, but somebody has scratched it. Part 3. Ballad. Many old ballads are sung to new words. Butt. The butt of pipe stuck out from the wall where the sink had been removed. The goat butted the boy and knocked him down. Consul. You will have to call the consul before your passport is expired. Enshrine. Memories of happier days were enshrined in the old man's heart. Gobble. He gobbled the ice cream so fast that he got a headache. Harangue. We had to listen to a long harangue about our own shortcomings. Mow. He spent the whole afternoon mowing the grass in the backyard. Pilgrim. In the Middle Ages, many people used to go as pilgrims to Jerusalem and to other holy places in Europe. Shear. The farmers sheared the wool from the sheep. Strangle. He strangled her to death by a cord put around her neck. Walnut. The kernel of the walnut is eaten by itself or used in cakes or cookies. Part 4. Beaver. Beavers are noted for their skill in building dams across streams. Cavalry. The cavalry is much superior in mobility to the infantry. Creak. The floor creaked as he stepped on a loose board. Fir. The fir remains green all year, and its needles are distributed evenly around the branch. Hangar. During the heavy storm, airplanes should be kept in the hangar. Kernel. The kernel of the argument is who discovered the islands first. Measles. What seems to be a cold often turns out to be the beginning of measles. Puff. With a huge puff, the balloon was blown up and then suddenly burst. Sleet. Sleet forms when rain falls through a layer of cold air. Surname. Smith is a very common English surname. Wig. Women often wear wigs over their real hair for beauty of fashion. Part 5. Bleach. Bleached bones lay on the hot sands of the desert. Chariot. Chariots were used in ancient times for fighting, racing, and in processions. Crutch. He has been crippled since he broke his leg. Now he can't walk without a pair of crutches. Flirt. She flirted with many men, but loved only one. Gull. They were very pleased to see some gulls flying in the sky, full of hope that they would soon get ashore. Kit. When I bought a new car, a kit of tools came with it. Morsel. The hungry children did not leave a morsel of food on their plates. Prototype. The strange mechanical device is the prototype of modern cars. Snare. They set a snare for rabbits on the hill, but unfortunately, a wild cat was caught by it. Trigger. When you squeeze the trigger, a round or rounds of ammunition are fired. When the burglar tripped the wire, it triggered an alarm. Weir. The weir across the river stops or controls the flow of the river above it. Access. The students have access to the library only in the afternoon. Excess. Last year, we had several floods. We had an excess of rain. Adapt. Long ago, Eskimos learned how to adapt to the cold to live in the Arctic region. Adopt. The club adopted a new set of rules concerning its membership. Adverse. His adverse criticism didn't upset me, but encouraged me. Averse. My parents are averse to our picnic plan. They don't approve of it. Affect. The government decision whether to continue the project will affect the future of our national economy. Effect. I have warned him to drive slowly several times, but it doesn't have any effect at all. Affectation. The new secretary is sincere and quiet without affectation. Affection. His gentleness and kind ways increased his colleagues' affection for him. Part 2. Allusion. The preacher likes to make an allusion to Homer while preaching. Illusion. The white walls create the illusion that the room is very large. Annual. My birthday party is the biggest annual event of my family. Annul. The judge annulled the contract because one of the signers was too young. Appraise. The couple appraised the house carefully before offering to buy it. Apprise. The club members were immediately apprised of his change of plans. Argument. We should try to settle the matter by argument, not by fighting. Augment. The king augmented his power by taking over rights that had belonged to the nobles. Assure. The man assured himself that the bridge was safe before crossing it. Insure. He insured his car against accident, theft, and fire. Don't forget to check your work to ensure its accuracy. Part 3. Bandage. The doctor tied up the patient's broken ankle with a bandage. Bondage. They seemed to love bondage more than liberty. Carton. Pack the books in a small carton to carry it easily. Cartoon. Political cartoons often represent the U.S. as a tall man with chin whiskers, called Uncle Sam. Censor. The novel was banned by the censor as likely to stir up suspicion of the government among the readers. All news is being rigorously censored. Censure. The principal of the school censured the students for their rude behavior. Collision. Many people were killed in the collision between the bus and the car. Collusion. The leaders of the collusion against the government were caught and punished. Confidant. I have only one confidant to whom I can tell my secrets. Confident. The doctor felt confident that his patient would recover from pneumonia. Part 4. Consul. I am Swedish. Is there a Swedish consul in Omaha? Council. The Council of Ministers advised the king to dismiss the general. Counsel. The young man refused to listen to the old man's counsel. The murder suspect refused to answer the questions on the advice of his counsel. Dairy. The Hopkinses run the biggest dairy farm in the state of Arizona. Diary. It is very rewarding to keep a diary of daily happenings. Decease. Upon his decease, all his properties passed to his wife. Disease. Measles and chickenpox are two diseases of childhood. Decent. It is not decent to laugh at a crippled person. Descent. The road makes a sharp descent just around the corner. Dissent. The three justices dissented from the Supreme Court's decision. Dissent among the senior members was the main cause of the disintegration of the club. Desert. Lawrence rode a camel across the desert on an exploring expedition. Desert. He had intended to desert his wife and children, but changed his mind. Dessert. Strawberry pie is one of my most favorite desserts. Disassemble. Many students know how to disassemble the radio, but few know how to put it together. Dissemble. She tried to dissemble her anger with a smile on her face. Draft. I've made a first draft of my speech for Friday, but it still needs a lot of work. Drought. The long drought has killed most of the crops in the fields. Eligible. She knows a lot of eligible young men who are all rich and attractive. Illegible. The ink has faded so that many words were illegible. Eminent. Washington was eminent both as general and as president. Imminent. The scientist predicted that an earthquake was imminent in Tokyo area. Part 2. Exalt. The members exalted Mr. Smith when they elected him president of the association. Exult. All the people exulted to find that our national team won the gold medal in the international basketball tournament. Ingenuous. The trap made of an old tin can and some wire is an ingenious device. Ingenuous. The ingenuous person had never thought of being suspicious of what others told him. Jealous. When my little brother sees mother holding the new baby, he becomes jealous. Zealous. The clerk in the toy section of the department seems very zealous in pleasing the customers. Material. The dress that Miss Lee was wearing at the party was made of synthetic material. Material. The statesman said the Iron Curtain countries had vast resources in manpower and materiel. Moral. George Washington is known to be a moral and just man. Morale. I am sure that we will win the battle. The morale of our troops is very high. Part 3. Ordinance. Freedom of religious worship was guaranteed to all settlers in the Northwest Territory by the Ordinance of 1787. Ordnance. The pirate ships in the West Indies were armed with heavy ordnance. Parish. The minister worked very hard to make the rounds of his parish and visit the homes of the sick. Perish. They said that this flower would not perish even when frost comes. Perpetrate. The police still don't know who perpetrated the murder of the housewife. Perpetuate. This monument was built to perpetuate the memory of the national hero. Personality. Many psychologists are inclined to attribute the formation of personality entirely to the operation of the cultural and physical environment. Personality. That car is his personality. Using it without his permission is illegal. Persecute. Blessed are those who are persecuted for their righteousness' sake. Prosecute. The engineer of the wrecked train was prosecuted for criminal negligence. He prosecuted an inquiry into reasons for the company's failure. Part 4. Portable. The author takes his portable typewriter wherever he goes. Potable. They set up purifying systems in dozens of places where the water was not potable. Prescribe. Good citizens always do what the laws prescribe. The doctor prescribed a new medicine for the pain in my joints. Proscribe. In earlier days, the church proscribed dancing and card playing. Reality. Slaughter and destruction are terrible realities of war. Realty. His realty includes a big mansion. Statue. Nearly every city in the United States has a statue of some famous man. Stature. A man 6 feet tall is above average stature in this part of the world. Vacation. My family is going to have a short vacation on the East Coast. Vocation. You will not make a good teacher unless you feel teaching is your vocation. Part 1. Alumna. My wife is an alumna of Wuhan University. Alumnus. President Kennedy was an alumnus of Harvard University. Alumni. My son and my daughter are both alumni of Ohio State University. Amoral. Cats are amoral. They can't be censured for killing birds. Immoral. Lying and stealing are considered immoral conducts in every human society. Unmoral. Many scientists believe their research to be unmoral, no matter what the results will be. Avocation. Stamp collecting as well as fishing is Mr. Evans' favorite avocation. Vocation. Bookkeeping is Mr. Jones's vocation, and photography is his avocation. Biannual. Our school doctor recommends a biannual visit to the dentist. I am going to the dentist's for the second time this year. Biennial. The sophomores and seniors are taking the biennial exam this afternoon. Part 2. Chord. He is replacing the broken cord of his violin. Cord. He had tied the package with a cord before he took it to the post office. Clench. He clenched his teeth to endure the pain of the wound suffered from the accident. Clinch. By clinching nails over the canvas, they held the torn sail to the mast. Climate. For 50 years or more, the climate of the Arctic has been warming up gradually. Weather. The weather will be very hot and humid in Chongqing today. Compare. We compared two books to see which one had the better illustrations. Contrast. She contrasted her present life of luxury with the poverty of her childhood. Connotation. The words snake and red have unpleasant connotations for many people. Denotation. The denotation of the word home is place where one lives, but it has many connotations. Part 3. Contemptible. Cheating on a test is considered one of the most contemptible acts in the military academy. Contemptuous. The rich man is contemptuous of my humble home and poor surroundings. Continual. We experienced a continual series of hot spells last summer. Continuous. On holidays, we can see a continuous line of cars on highways. Credible. It hardly seems credible that your son has grown so tall in 1 year. Credulous. Only a credulous person would fall for that old trick. Disinterested. An umpire must be an entirely disinterested but keen observer. Uninterested. The audience yawned and seemed uninterested in the politician's speech. Disorganized. The office where everything had worked so smoothly became completely disorganized after Mr. Levine resigned. Unorganized. Form a union. An unorganized mob can accomplish nothing but chaos. Part 4. Diverse. A well-balanced diet is made up of diverse food. Diverse. A great many diverse opinions were expressed at the meeting, but none was worthwhile. Dual. The training airplane has dual controls, one set for the learner and one for the teacher. Duel. The opposing two lawyers fought a duel to settle their differences. Egoist. John is such an egoist that he only cares about himself. Egotist. Marian is such an egotist that she talks about herself all the time. Emerge. After the shower, the sun emerged from behind the clouds. Emerge. He immersed his aching feet in a bucket of hot water. Emigrant. It is expected that the total number of emigrants from this country will reach 20,000 this year. Immigrant. California has several thousand immigrants from other states. Farther. He has to leave now. He lives farther from here than I do. Further. All the members of the committee agreed to inquire further into the matter. Hanged. The man living next door hanged himself in sorrow after his wife died. Hung. We hung our reproduction of Mona Lisa above the fireplace. Historic. Guilin is one of the historic spots that you should visit. Historical. Upon retiring from office, the president gave all the historical papers to the library. Human. The philosopher claims that kindness is a human trait, but I don't believe it. Humane. Humane people are considerate of not only other people, but also animals. Imaginary. Some people do not believe that ghosts are not real, but imaginary beings. Imaginative. The imaginative child always likes to make up fairy tales. Part 2. Incomparable. Bessie Smith was an incomparable singer in her day. Uncomparable. It is foolish to compare horses with airplanes. They are uncomparable. Incredible. Some old superstitions seem incredible to most educated people. Incredulous. People nowadays are incredulous about ghosts and witches. Lay. The gentleman laid his hand on his son's shoulder. Lie. The wounded soldier was lying on the battlefield. Apt. This kind of shoe is apt to slip on wet ground. Henry is an apt student of the practical science. Liable. Children under the age of 10 are all liable to diseases. He declared that he was not liable for his wife's debts. Likely. The weather forecast says that it's likely to be hot tomorrow. Luxuriant. The backyard of our house has a luxuriant growth of weeds. Luxurious. She is too proud, too luxurious to marry an average man like you. Part 3. Moan. From time to time during the night, there was a moan of pain from the sick man. Mourn. The whole nation mourned the death of the much-loved president. Oral. The company will give only oral tests to the applicants. Verbal. This written report contains both a verbal description and a sketch of the building. Personal. The minister made a personal visit to the scene of the fighting. Personnel. The general issued an order to capture the hill to all personnel. Respectably. The man seemed poor, but he was respectably dressed. Respectfully. Children should speak respectfully to their elders. Respectively. The first, second, and third prizes went to Jack, George, and Frank respectively. Raise. She raised her finger to her lips as a sign for silence. The farmer raises cattle and crops. Rise. The sun will rise at 5:45 tomorrow morning. Part 4. Register. We have to go to the government patent office to register the new trademark. It is safe to register the letter containing the check. Registrar. Go to the registrar of the university to know your grades. Sailor. The boat we are on is the best sailor in the fleet. Sailor. The men in our Navy are called sailors if they are not officers. Salon. A group of college professors were waiting in the main salon to see the Minister of Education. Saloon. The ship's passengers have their dinners in the dining saloon. Subconscious. It was certain that Oswald might have a subconscious desire to injure his father. Unconscious. Edna was unconscious for 2 hours after the accident. The general was unconscious of being followed by the spy. Transcript. The club's secretary prepared several transcripts of minutes of the meeting. Transcription. The transcription of words into phonetic symbols requires special training. Altar. The woman knelt before the altar to pray to God for her son's safe return. Alter. If it rains, we have to alter our plans to have a picnic on Sunday. Ascent. Chinese mountain climbers made a successful ascent of Mount McKinley in North America. Assent. I won't give my assent to her plan because it is not well prepared. Cannon. There are several old cannons on the wall of the castle. Canon. This canon has been enacted by the church council very recently. Canvas. The tops of my sneakers are made of canvas. Canvas. The salesman canvassed the whole city for subscriptions of the magazine. Cession. The cession of the territory could not be avoided because they lost the war. Session. Be seated. The court is now in session. Part 2. Faint. The soldier fainted at the sight of his own blood. The color became faint as the sun set. Faint. He fainted with his left hand and hit me with his right. Intention. In recent years, there has been an intention of the struggle for political power in the country. Intention. She felt offended at my remarks, but it wasn't my intention to hurt her. Pray. There is nothing that we can do now but pray God helps us in our troubles. Pray. The lion seized its prey and ate it. Principal. Chicago is the principal city in the Midwest of the United States. The principal told the teachers to dismiss school during the heavy snowstorm. Principle. This country was founded on the principle of individual freedom for all. Stationary. The population of France remained stationary almost for a century. Stationary. Herbert bought a notebook at the stationery store. Part 3. Address. Please write your name and address on this paper. The president addressed the nation on the subject of war and peace. Attribute. Darkness is an attribute of night, as brightness is that of day. Attribute. We attribute Edison's success to intelligence and hard work. Committee. The teachers appointed a committee of 5 members to plan the class picnic. The court appointed Mr. Lansing as the committee that would take care of the boys' property. Concert. She likes music very much. She never misses a concert. Concert. We concerted on the most proper methods for speedily executing the manager's instructions. Content. I tried but couldn't understand the content of his speech. Content. John contented himself with 2 glasses of beer, even though he could have had more. Part 4. Converse. Honest but poor is the converse of poor but honest. Converse. He conversed with his wife about the summer vacation. Desert. The Sahara is a great desert in the northern part of Africa. Desert. After the family deserted the farm, its buildings fell to ruin. Digest. The publisher decided to publish a digest of international law. Digest. I like milk very much, but I can't digest it very well. Instinct. Most animals have an instinct to protect their young. Instinct. Her face was instinct with benevolence and kindness. Intimate. Although the governor knew many people, he had few intimate friends. Intimate. He intimated that he was dissatisfied with his job. Part 5. Minute. The train arrived at exactly 4 minutes past 8. Minute. There has been a minute improvement in the working conditions of the factory. Object. A dark object moved between me and the door. Object. Do you object to my smoking in this room? Refuse. He asked her to marry him, but she refused. Refuse. The street cleaning department took away all refuse from the street. Tear. The little girl was in tears because she'd lost her mother. Tear. Don't tear up paper. Put it in the wastebasket. Used. The janitor removed used towels from the rack. Used. It took long to get used to foreign food.